Good morning, a nice Sunday morning in a park in Hove. And I'm here with a very experienced veteran campaigner on the political side, but one who's joined us in the direct democracy movement in recent months. So Nigel Furness, he needs no introduction to many people, friend and enemy in Hove and Brighton. So I'll be speaking to him for some time about direct democracy and his journey to that as a long-term veteran campaigner. So let's introduce you to Nigel.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Nigel Furness, and I'm a lifelong Brightonian, Hovonian. I've been involved now this year for 6 full decades in politics local, politics national, and almost a touch of the international. I began my career politically as a communist, a party few have ever heard of, the Communist Party of Britain, Marxist-Leninist. I've always been in pursuit of democracy, and I'm still searching for democracy at the moment, but now that I've joined the direct democracy movement, I wish I'd heard about that 6 decades ago. That to me is the clear and only path. Direct democracy is such a good seller because direct democracy involves the right of recall locally and nationally for politicians. And let's face it, we all know politicians who don't keep their promises. They don't do what they say on the tin. How nice it would be to have enshrined in our laws locally and nationally that such people can be sacked. This is clearly the way forward. Now, direct democracy is entirely about the people taking control. Whether or not you have a first past the post system, or you have
Proportional representation.
Yes, thank you, Neil. Thank you. Have a senior moment. The proportional representation, it matters not one jot if the people that are elected into council chambers or into town and city halls just carry on behaving the way that they're behaving right now. Just to give you one quick example, on the television this morning on GB News, James Cleverly was being interviewed about 2 more top Tory officials who are now being investigated by the police for insider trading. So desperate are they know their careers are over, that's all they ever went into it for, that they just want to make yet another quick buck by dishonest means. I'll be careful what I say here, but I think that gives you an idea, cutting across all the parties, of what calibre of person. This is the thing, not totally about what party is in the council chamber, what party is in Westminster, the calibre of people that dare to put themselves up for election and ask us to trust them with their vote. Direct democracy will change all that. Now, let me give you some little local examples lately. We are trying at the moment, we've only just started on this, to get 2 referendums, petitions for 2 local referendums. We've had referendums in Brighton and Hove before on purely local issues. One is the Labour Council, which was elected last May. That Labour Council, May of last year, I should say, that Labour Council now has, for the first time in 20 years, an overall majority. And how? They've got a huge majority. Are they safe with that? No. Straight away, something was never mentioned on the tin, never mentioned in their party manifesto, to abolish the committee system where all parties are represented according to the proportion of councillors they have, and replace it with a behind closed doors cabinet system. That's not all. Altering the whole system of how democracy works. In that, we've had now for between 35 and 40 years, the public have a right to ask questions about anything that's of concern to them, and it's their opportunity to put it to whichever council, be it the council leader or leader of whichever committee or subcommittee, a question, and which is printed in the agenda, and a supplementary question which is not printed, and that is the one where these politicians are shown up, because They have to think on their feet. They haven't got the council officers running around costing a fortune, getting all the information for them. They propose now to limit the public questions to only items on the agenda for that meeting, but wait till you hear. You have to give 6, I'm not quite sure because they've changed that, whether it's 6 or 7 working days notice, in order to get a question in and put on the agenda. How are you going to put questions about the things pertinent to the current council meeting, for example, when the agenda only comes out 5 days, note that folks, 5 days before the actual council meeting. Yes, exactly, Neil. 5 days before, and it gets worse. If anybody's tried to navigate, even before these changes, to navigate the Brighton Hove City Council website, I frankly think it would be easier to navigate a minefield, certainly for somebody like myself with visual impairments. The whole thing is completely contrived, and it gets worse still. The council leader has the right to choose. So, say, for example, you had a dozen questions put in. You've got half an hour to cover that. She has the right to decide which questions should be asked. I don't call that democracy. I don't know about you.
So,
now,
Nigel, just
yes,
your background, long ago, 60 years ago.
Yes, yeah, 1964 it began.
And with the Communist Party, what do you see the difference? And now that you found out about direct democracy, how does that compare, really, in contrast with what you were thinking back then and what the party thought then about direct democracy, or was it ever even mentioned?
Oh, democracy was on everybody's lips. Don't you just know, in the Communist Party, we followed the People's Republic of China, the People's Republic of Albania, not the Soviet Union. We regarded them as revisionists, far too right-wing, yes, all those years ago. You see, it's so easy to prattle, talk is cheap, to prattle the words democracy. I don't think any of them would have recognised a wholesome dose of democracy if one would have slapped them round the chops in the middle of the high street. Now, talk is one thing. Direct democracy, that is democracy. Because what can be more democratic than a referendum? Even the mainstream press and the powers that be have described the 2016 referendum on leaving the EU as the biggest democratic exercise in this country's history. So, and if people say, oh, no, we don't want direct democracy, we don't want referendums, well, they don't dare say we don't want democracy per se. Tell me this, what are they so afraid of? What have they got to hide? The people are their masters. Politicians have somehow got this idea into their heads that they're our masters. Well, they're not. The people are sovereign.
So you found with the communists, it's all about the party?
Oh, gosh, yes. And not just the party. You see, when I was a teenager, I read 1984. Oh, my. What an eye-opener that was. And yes, it didn't stop me becoming a communist, but guess what? Little bells started to ring in my head. That déjà vu feeling. This sounds familiar. Where have I heard this before? All pigs, of course, are equal. That goes without saying. Funny thing is, though, some pigs seem to be considerably more equal than others.
Yeah. And then you moved on to the Conservative Party. I mean, French journey, but did you ever hear them talk about direct democracy?
Never.
So it wasn't about the vanguard party taking over, but it was certainly about that party and the interests that back it. Avoiding the public, really, isn't it, in their real will? Especially, what do you think in terms of the past few decades, how democracy has developed here? When you think back to, 40, 50 years ago, as a representative democracy, which direction has it travelled in?
That direction. That direction. What's happened is the rise of bureaucracy and quangos. Now, here's the main differential. Politicians love to think they're in charge. No, they're not. They're spending fortunes of our money, because don't forget, councils, governments, they have no money of their own. All the money is ours. It's the taxpayers, be they direct or indirect, and most of us are both. That's a fact. Even pensioners are paying VAT on their, 5%, but it's still 5% on their energy bills, 20% on their phone bills. We're the most highly taxed nation in Europe. Isn't that hard to believe when you go back to the days of Maggie Thatcher and Nigel Lawson being the Chancellor? Down, down, down went the taxes. How curious. Up, up, up went the employment figures. There were blips, of course, with the deindustrialisation. Up went the quality of living. People who never even could have considered buying their own home suddenly found that they could be homeowners, suddenly found they could own a little jalopy, not something flash, but they actually had their own wheels. That's independence, that's democracy, that's self-reliance.
And that's reducing now, isn't it? Houses are priced out of the
Well, it's
hands of
gone.
anyone who's,
I submit it's
not
virtually
well
gone.
paid. Yeah.
It's virtually gone.
So, and that's why there's so much dissatisfaction. And, you've looked at it coming from all, that background of many decades, looking at it as it is now. Then what was it when you learned about it? How quickly did it change your mind and this paradigm shift from representative to direct?
Are you talking about direct democracy here now?
Thinking about for you when you learned of it and how quickly your mind shifted.
It didn't take that long. To my surprise, I was expelled from the communists. And I'm very proud to say I was expelled from the communists. And I was expelled not because of anything political that I'd done, but because of a child abuse thing under the very roof. Do you want to cut that?
Yeah, we just want to talk about direct democracy rather than about the leaving the Communist Party. Why? Because we're going off into tangents.
Do you want to cut that little bit out?
I'll cut that out.
Cut that out. Okay. Right. So start again.
Yeah. So right. When you first heard about direct democracy, although you're an experienced person, which indicates that people who are less experienced than you are and closely involved with politics, I've not heard much about the Swiss system, the fact that Estonia and Taiwan have direct democracy as well, and many states in the United States, and it's used around the world. But in particular, its effectiveness and its attraction. So as soon as you learned of it, how long did it take you to suddenly think, hang on a minute, this is something, that suits me down to the ground?
I'll be quite honest with you, it was virtually overnight. When I met you, and you gave me various, little pamphlets and what have you on direct democracy, I can't believe my woeful ignorance, but I had no idea how Switzerland was run. All I knew was it was a neutral country and it had a number of cantons, and I wasn't fully sure what they were. But the point is, what I've been trying to do, I've been trying all my life, I realised, to be far too much of a perfectionist, because I was looking for something that so far hasn't happened. And that was, perfect or near perfect examples of people, whatever political persuasion they might be, to stand for election in council chambers, to stand for election in parliament. And of course, suddenly it clicked with direct democracy. But I've been going about this all the wrong way, because you can put, and I've seen so many examples here locally of this, somebody you were having a drink happily with in the pub for years before they got elected, and it's as if the day after they got elected, there's some little department they take them off to perform a full frontal lobotomy, and the person you knew has completely disappeared, as if someone or something else has occupied their body. What was needed, of course, was the all-important mechanism, that lever. We employ you, we can sack you if we choose, and we don't have to wait for an election.
Yeah, and that's
what changed me, yes.
It's just the simple use of the referendum, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
For many aspects of politics, local, national, and but routinely as well. This is the secret, that it becomes part of the political way,
Yes.
part of our lives.
Well, it's got to get into our psyche, and it's going to take, it is taking a lot of people. Yes, they grab the concept, but then they think, oh, yes, but can we really do that? Only if we fight for it. And we're all campaigning for 2 referendums here in this city. Watch this space. One is about the Constitution, and 2, the Labour Council, this same Labour Council, has now announced only yesterday, they're going to extend the cycle lane, take 2 lanes of traffic away, extend the cycle lane right the way along to the Portslade border. There's already chaos. Anybody that knows this city, there's already chaos all over the city because of this. We being the Friends of Brighton and Hove, whom I also represent, just a group of independents, we all got together, 8 of us stood for election. None of us won. None of us knew. None of us expected to win. We knew we wouldn't win. But what we did was target very carefully, and out went the Greens. The Green administration, Labour, in their panic, made it an election pledge to scrap that cycle lane. They've been in power now for 13 months. Yes. 13 coming on 14 months. What happened to the election pledge? To scrap the existing cycle lane.
Reneged on it.
Yep, not only reneged on it, and wait for it, it's only 4 million quid. This is the same administration that every other word is Tory, or 2 words, Tory cuts. Tory cuts. We can't afford to weed the streets. We can't afford to empty the bins. We can't afford to provide the very basic service. Cycle lanes, if those cycle lanes were absolutely packed with bikes and it took traffic off the roads, you wouldn't see me.
So the people aren't being listened to. They're not being listened to.
Slightest.
And you're pushing for more referendums. And within the parties here, and you've spoken to obviously a good number of them. All of them.
Mm.
What are their feelings about direct democracy and referendums? Are you finding people converting?
Well, this is the thing. I have spoken to virtually all the councillors, not quite all of them. There's an awful lot for me to still get to know. Whatever their persuasion, when I say, now, direct democracy, and I have the leaflets in my pocket, and I give them one of the leaflets, and it's just a 1-page thing, all the basic principles, and say, take it away and read it. But if you want to talk to me for a moment here now, what is your view on direct democracy? Oh, well, I say, well, presumably you do agree with democracy. The reaction, I have never had a different reaction, especially from an elected politician, straight on the defensive. Oh, of course, I believe in democracy as much as say, what are you accusing me of? Well, then you'll love this. That's how I do it. Now, but the thing is, talk is cheap, words are easy. Now we intend to hold them to it. Let's see if these same councillors are prepared to badger the leader of the council, the leader of the Labour group, to say, oh yes, let's have a referendum because we believe in direct democracy. What's this space?
As you know, Nigel Farage has been backing Swiss-style referendums as well, where he's saying that where the people have issues and they want them addressed, they should be able to bring those up as referendums, create an initiative as it would be in the Swiss system, and get the politicians to be brought to account, through having this, if they can get enough support, say 2% of the voters signing up to that idea, and then getting a first past the post referendum based, if they've got that 2%. So it seems straightforward enough, but that's reform. And reform are flying up the charts, as we know. So it's going to be very interesting to see what Nigel and his team can achieve. So within Brighton, have you got many reform candidates standing?
In Brighton, we have a reform candidate standing in Brighton Pavilion. We have a reform candidate standing, Martin Hare standing here in Hove, where I am. And we have an alliance, or let's say a deal, with the SDP. And the SDP, Valerie Gray, is standing in Kent Town. Valerie Gray is known to me anyway because of our union of free speech, where people of all persuasions come and freely exchange views. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens.
And Martin Hess's view on democracy?
Martin Hess loves direct democracy.
And are there any independents standing who are backing direct democracy as well?
Yes. There's Emma Wall is standing also in Kemp Town. Valerie Gray backs direct democracy too. So I'm delighted to say yes.
So this is unusual, isn't it? The first time in our history we've had candidates standing for direct democracy, not just talking about it once in 1896 in Parliament. And Nigel, one other point. A.B. Dicey spoke long ago about the power of the referendum, and he made the point, as one of our greatest constitutional lawyers, if not the greatest, back in the 1890s, that the referendum could replace the House of Lords, because it would basically be the vehicle for the nation to express its will on those important issues, which is basically what Nigel's saying, is on those important issues that the people want addressed. So, what do you see the future of the referendum once we've got it in? How would that work? Do you see it surviving?
Well, yes, because as I recall, I'm no great authority on A.B. Dicey. I'm studying A.B. Dicey at the moment. But I think I recall him saying that once we've got the referendum, thank you, I'm having another senior. Once we've got the referendum, I'm getting mixed up, referendum reform. Once we got the referendum, we would only get rid of it with a revolution. Now, interesting that you bring up the point about replacing the House of Lords, because this is a key policy of reform. What on earth do we need a second chamber? And even an elected second chamber, I don't like that idea at all, because, here we are, and all the parties are doing what they always do, and that is promising from day one there'll be changes. The trouble is, and this is what everybody's saying to me, and probably you, Neil, probably to everybody, yes, but we never get change. They blather on, then say, give us another 5 years, please. No, it's got to stop. Having that mechanism of the, oh dear, I am getting myself mixed up here. But having the referendum, what further lever do we need? We don't need a second chamber, elected or otherwise. I think if you asked anybody and I'll guarantee you, whatever their political persuasion, they all want change. Keir Starmer's Labour Party say they want change. We know it's going to be much the same thing. Why? Because 1, the economy is trashed. 2, because of the state of the political system. It's the political system that's frustrating the people of this country, I would submit, more than it is the politicians, because with the best will in the world, picture this scene. Now, Reform are doing extraordinarily well in the polls at the moment, and that will continue. I can see that going only in one direction, upwards. Just picture if, for example, referendum, the Reform Party were to meet, somebody's joined us. Another direct democracy supporter, I suspect. Even the bird wants to listen.
They want to come and vote on it.
Yes, well, bird or no bird, picture the scene if Nigel Farage were to win the election, and now if we had the proportional representation system, what would ever get done in the next 5 years? Because all the other people on the proportional number of seats they have in the House would do everything, because they're establishment parties, everything. Oh, they would say, we want our democracy. Yes, but their democracy isn't our democracy.
Still party.
Yes, this is why we have to have the mechanism of referendums.
Yeah, you see, the talk of PR,
yes,
it's a secondary issue.
It's a diversion.
It's not the primary one. Without the reform that Dicey was recommending back over 130 years back,
yes,
we'll carry on in the same vein. We'll have the same issues, even with PR, maybe worse, because you don't get the same decisiveness. So, yeah, I agree with you entirely, obviously. I mean, that the primary reform that is required and a paradigm shift it will bring with it for
Yes.
to our benefit
Yes.
is obviously the referendum, and that's what Nigel's been pressing, isn't it?
Yes.
For reform UK, that the people can call referendums on important matters that they want addressed because the parties and the politicians are not doing so, and that would be the same under a PR system. So yeah.
Well, as Nigel said when launching the contract, which I think was a brilliant concept, by the way, instead of a referendum not worth the paper it's written on, the trees slaughtered for it, our contract with the British people. And yes, said he right at the end, if you recall, after all, why shouldn't the British people have the right to call a referendum if they're concerned about any issue? Now, mainly, we have in mind that this is on key things of state security, things of national importance. Should we go to, imagine if we'd had, now just imagine for a moment, if we'd had the referendum system, the right of recall, when Tony Blair launched his wholly illegal, totally unnecessary Middle Eastern wars. How different that might have been, and Keir Starmer might like to think, yes, well, the Labour Party wouldn't have taken all these years regrouping themselves if the people had had the right to tell them, we don't want this, and if you do it, we're not going to vote for you.
Yeah, and again, this is
good example, I think.
You're right, it's a good example, because you think of our nation as a vassal state of the United States.
It is.
And what's happened this morning, Nigel, with Google? What's happened last night? What did Nigel Farage say about Google or whoever it was stopping his advertising or his messaging getting out? This is election interference by a United States corporation in the British elections.
Yes, Google.
And the same when you look at Liz Truss, the interference there. It wasn't just locals, it was obviously international movements that were involved. So again, with direct democracy, this is where the people take control of what national, international agreements were bound by or pull out. I mean, what was it happened with the ECHR ruling recently in Switzerland? There was something went on as well, wasn't there?
Well, I was overjoyed when I heard that, because a group of women in Switzerland took their government to the European Court of Human Rights, and the case before the court was that the government was not obeying, note the word, obeying their net zero quota. Did the Swiss people vote for a net zero quota? No, they did not. But guess what now? The government knows perfectly well that people were building for a petition on this, and the government, and good for the Swiss government, has turned around and told the ECHR that they are not the government of Switzerland. We were elected and we run Switzerland. Don't you just wish we had politicians of that caliber here?
Yeah.
But of course, those politicians in Switzerland knew perfectly well the overwhelming majority of people want none of this nonsense.
And the other thing is, the main thing with Switzerland is about driving it down. All power is driven down as low as they can drive it. So it's much more local, and people have these referendums at local level, at canton level, down even below that community level, like parish council level, I suppose it would be the equivalent. So these are, the great benefits that we can see, that we believe in the movement, obviously. So it's easy to convince people of this, isn't it?
I've not found it any problem whatsoever. And that's the honest truth.
And you pulled in many councillor candidates, MP candidates from short conversations, presentation of the one page.
Literally, I've only got a couple of minutes, Nigel. Look, can I give you one of these? And I always say, just take it home, read it when you get a moment. I know how busy you are. Give me a buzz the next time we talk. Oh, yes. And people do just that.
And they're from various party groups and alliance.
Green, both the Labour Party, yes, interestingly, both the Labour Party still jousting for control of the party, and the Tories.
There we go.
Oh, and I might add too, independents, because we have a number of independents here too.
Exactly. So, I think, Nigel, we had a good discussion here. Thank you very much for your time on this.
Thank you.
And hopefully Brighton and Hove will be all the better for getting a reform candidate elected, maybe an independent, who knows. I believe in direct democracy, and with the support of Nigel Farage and others around this country, because we have many supporters in reform, obviously, then we can see the change that is required to bring us that better Britain.
Yes.
For the future.
Definitely.
For my children, your children, or
Yes.
I'm sorry, but
well, we're doing this for the future.
Exactly.
I'm 74. I'm not doing this for me, and I'm not in good health. How much longer am I going to be around? And this is why I get on so well with young people. And I tell them, if I was able to buy a house, a 22-roomed house, in 1978 for £11,750, you couldn't buy the proverbial broom cupboard for that. And I'm not talking about opposite Harrods. And my advice to young people is, if you're going to put up with this, and you're not going to get off your knees, you're going to be slaves. And I, for one, will have no sympathy for you, because we're not going to be here forever to fight for you.
Thank you, Nigel.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Many thanks indeed.